So, hello, good morning. Thanks for waking up and getting dressed and showing up here. I know it was a challenge for me. I'm still on Seattle time. Just arrived last night. My son just graduated college on Sunday, so yeah. Thank you. Excuse me, whoa. Yeah, so I'm a little off since I was traveling all yesterday to get here. Anyway, my name is Brechner, and I am a development manager for Xbox. Xbox is a gaming console, for those of you who haven't heard about it. We were the #1 console with Xbox 360. We're now playing catch up to the PS4, who's doing very well, but we're a very close second, and we'll overtake them any day now, I'm sure of it. So. No, it's a wonderful business to be in, not the least of which is when people ask me what I do for a living, and I say I work on Xbox, I don't have to give them a lengthy explanation. So that's great. It's a great place to work. Xbox has gone through a very interesting journey, and that's what I'm going to share with you today, is what our experience has been. Now, there's lots of different ways to talk about what Xbox has gone through, but given that this is the Kanban conference and we're all about how we can do things more efficiently, simply, and deliver continuous value to our customers, I'm going to look at it through that perspective, is how Xbox has gone from what was more of a traditional Microsoft organization with long ship cycles and so on, to getting into the situation that we have today, where we are continuously delivering value to all of our customers, and in a fairly unusual way. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And then it's just 3 slides, so there'll be plenty of time for questions. And then talk about how Kanban gave those teams that are using it within Xbox, there's a variety of different techniques used within Xbox, but those teams that were using Kanban, how we had a unique advantage in making this happen, and why Kanban is really catching on within the organization. So let me talk a little bit about Xbox. So Xbox, the first console that we created was in the early 2000s. It wasn't even connected to the internet. The way it got updated was really through disks and stuff. So it came from a different time. It did have an Ethernet port on it, but the initial version of it really wasn't connected. Then we created Xbox Live, which is a web service. That service is mostly for gaming. That is, I'm playing a game in my house. I want to play with my friends. Be they in another country or just down the street. And so the internet connection was mostly about being able to connect games together and have people play with each other. We also did a certain amount of downloads of small games and a little bit of purchasing. But that was it. We shipped new versions of the console perhaps once a year, maybe twice. I feel like I've got a cartoon soundtrack. We delivered content maybe once or twice a year, and that was about it. Then the Xbox 360 came out, and it really was the same story. It had much better networking. It had wireless, all those kinds of good things. But the commerce on it, the publishing on it, really, again, was only maybe 2, maybe 3 times a year. With the biggest one, of course, being in the fall for the holiday season. And then that changed in 2008. So what happened in 2008 is that we changed the home screen that gamers would see when they booted the box. And that home screen was no longer a set of kind of menus. They were all graphical. They were very fancy. But it used to just be a set of menus. And then it became a whole programmed set of tiles. And there would be advertisements, there would be promotions, Of course, you would have your games and your settings, but all those appeared in this 3D world where the tiles slid by and very interactive, and it would be republished every day. The content for it would be published every day. So that was a continuous publishing model, and it got people in the company starting to think more and more about the advantages of that kind of model. So I joined Xbox. I've been with Microsoft for 20 years now, and I had worked in Office, I had worked in Windows, a bunch of places. I joined Xbox, and I actually took over the team that was responsible for the tooling used for continuous publishing, as well as the websites and some of the web services. And that space is just ripe, obviously, for continuous value delivery. So when I joined them, the first thing that I did was took advantage of the continuous publishing that we had and switched to continuous service delivery. So this is our neighbors in Seattle, Amazon, were already doing continuous service delivery. For those of you who don't know what that is, you compile your code, you validate your code, using automated testing and various other testing, and then off it goes to production, often same day, often just connected directly to the build. So you build it and off it goes. Now, not everyone sees it at once, of course. First, maybe just you and your team see it, then a larger group of customers see it, but not every customer by any stretch. And then if it's still healthy and all that, it goes through larger and larger audiences until finally everyone's seeing it. So we moved to that model, and it's awesome. That model is the best. It's fantastic. It's transformative. Mostly, part of that is just the quality is always there, which of course is a whole concept in Kanban to make sure that the quality is always upstream. It's always there all the way through the process. And certainly when you're doing continuous delivery, continuous publishing, continuous deployment, those things, you get customer feedback immediately. Your code's always in a quality state, and you're just delivering value every day to your customers. It feels wonderful. You stay on top of things. You make mistakes, but you can fix them same day. It's tremendous. It's the way to be. So we were delighted with that. We were one of the first teams to do it in Xbox. And since that time, since 2011, when we first started working that way, every new service in Xbox now is delivered that way. All the teams switch to either Scrum or Kanban, all of them in these agile methods that allow them to be shipping all the time. And that's just the way we work now. So it was natural, of course, to extend that then to our apps. So Xbox also produces a number of apps, yes, for iPhones and for Android, as well as, of course, for Microsoft devices. And those apps, I don't know if you've heard of these things. How many of you actually play Xbox? Okay, fair number. Right, there you go. The rest of you hopefully have heard of it. So the main apps that we do, we've done a number of apps over the years. The main app that we do now is called Smart Glass, and it's a second screen experience. So you can have your Xbox going, and then you've got this app running on your tablet or your phone or even your PC. And that app allows you to control what's going on the screen, type in passwords, things like that that's easier to do with a keyboard, but also get extra information about the content that you're seeing on the screen. So if you're watching a video or a movie, you can get background information on it. If you're thinking about playing a game or your friends are playing a game, you can find out information about that game, even purchase it through the Smart Glass and so on. So those apps, we went to a continuous publishing model for those apps. And then there is the big thing, and that's what I'm going to spend the most of my time on, my remaining time on, which is we decided for the next console, which is the Xbox One, that we would adopt this continuous model even for the operating system. So the Windows operating system, as you probably are aware of, they ship a new version every few years. In some cases, it's 7 years. Sometimes we can ship an update within a year, but it's a very long cycle. For those of you who don't know, Xbox runs Windows. In fact, Windows 8 is what we're running right now on Xbox One. It'll switch to Windows 10, coming to a console near you in the near future. But right now it's running Windows 8. And so we're running the same operating system. We're in that same world. And we decided we would go ahead and treat even the operating system, even the console, just like we were treating our web services and our websites and all of that. We would update it all the time. And that's a big deal, because these are new device drivers, new networking stack, I kid you not, new graphics stack, as well as, of course, the user interface and all those things. So it's a big deal to update the operating system, but that's the direction that we wanted to go. So we had to make a number of adjustments to how we worked and what we had to do in order to pull this off. And Scrum and Kanban were absolutely critical to make this happen. Just being able to turn a lot faster, be very flexible in our planning. And in particular, I found for my teams who all use Kanban, well, let's just say I'm happy with my reviews. So, so let me talk a little bit about this continuous platform delivery, and then I'll be able to, and then a little bit about Kanban, and then I can take questions. So for the platform, for us to actually do the operating system and release that every day, every week, every month, it required a number of significant changes. First of all, those of you who do, how many of you actually do continuous deployment or continuous delivery for the web? Okay, so people. So you're familiar, in order to pull that off, it's a pretty frightening experience to say, I'm just going to compile this and push it out, to real customers in production services. So to pull that off, you need some telemetry in place that makes sure that when you push out new code that you haven't broken anything. And it's not just that the servers go down, but the customers are just having a bad experience. You've made a change. Maybe everything's working, but it's not working very nicely. So you need lots of telemetry. You need lots of analytics to make sure that what you're doing isn't harming anyone. And then, of course, the real advantage to it is by pushing it out every day, you can actually see what people are liking and know where you need to improve and what's working well and what you might want to do in other places. So that telemetry and the analytics are critical to pulling this off. So for Xbox, now we're dealing with the operating system. That's not the normal telemetry and analytics where you have the servers in-house, right? Those are sitting in people's homes. And so what we did was we actually hooked it directly into what's called ETW, which is oh gosh, what does it stand for? It's basically, I don't know if any of you have ever gone into the operating system in Windows and you brought up the error logs. You can bring up a dialog that shows you all the warnings and errors that have been happening in the background. That's this system, the CTW system. The acronym escapes me. And what we did was we basically put in a listener into that system that would take whichever errors we wanted. There'd be a filter on it, so it wasn't all of them, but whatever errors we wanted, and send them up to the same systems that we were using for our web services. So basically, anytime any developer on the operating system was just putting something into the logs, we would get it as telemetry online. And we could use all our analytical systems that we already had, because we've been doing continuous service delivery for a while. We can use those same systems then to look at what's happening with the consoles. It's been phenomenal. And we didn't have to retrain our developers at all because they were already used to logging things. If you've ever opened up that log, you can see there's a ton of stuff. Developers are not shy about putting things into the logs because they just want to know, right, how things are going. And then we made that programmable through a web service where we can actually change what the filtering is. If we're seeing certain things, we can get more information or less information. So it's fantastic. Obviously, it's aggregated. We're not checking on what any individual is doing, of course. But having that capability of seeing what's going on with the consoles was critical. So that was a big deal. Another thing we had to change was the branching. Part of the reason why Windows has these long cycles is, there's 8,000 people working on Windows. That's a lot of folks. And actually, it's 13,000 overall. It's amazing. It's a big, big thing. Xbox is fairly large itself. So getting code moved around with that many people working on it, and again, we're using the actual Windows code base, that's tricky. So getting the branching right was tough so that the code movement was fast enough for us to actually meet this cadence that we were looking for. And I'll talk a little bit about where we landed with it, but suffice it to say, we tried a lot of different things. My team is actually responsible for those systems, for the build systems, as well as a bunch of other things. And so it was dicey for a while, but we landed on a really good place. So I'll talk about that briefly in a moment. We also needed the build system to be a lot faster. So for those of you who don't know, and I wouldn't expect you to, it takes 12 to 14 hours to build Windows. Windows is large. There are a lot of languages. There's a lot of SKUs. There's a lot of code. There are a lot of tests. I'm not talking about running the tests. I'm just talking about building it. 12 to 14 hours. And by the way, that's on 4 very fast machines running in parallel. So this is a big thing. My team was able to knock that down to 7 hours, and from 12 to 14, depending upon how it was being built. We were able to knock it down to 7, and that made a huge difference. You may still think 7 is an absurd amount of time to be building anything. You're right, it is. Nonetheless, boy, it was very difficult getting it down to 7. We're working on getting it down much further, but it was very tough getting it to 7. Anyway, the reason why that's so important is that we wanted 2 shots a day. So in 7 hours, you can run the build, run through the test suite, validate it, get it uploaded, get it ingested, and send it out to customers. And if something's funky, you can do it again. We didn't often have to use it twice a day, but definitely leading up to launch, and then of course, every once in a while you make a mistake, it's important to be able to turn at least twice a day. So that was critical. And of course, we needed all the testing automated in order to pull that off. So those were all substantial changes to the way that we worked. The last pieces, of course, are in ingestion and flighting. We needed to be able to take a new version of the operating system, get it out into our web services. It's a substantial piece of software. Get it out to our web services, have it go out to all the CDNs, have customers be able to download it onto their machines, without waiting forever for it to show up. So that was a big deal. And then, of course, having flighting into that system so that it could only be downloaded to certain groups. The way that we do this is we have a group of Xbox engineers who are masochists, I suppose. They're willing to take the latest and greatest cutting edge build and put it on their devices and not worry about it and still play with it. So there's that small group. They take the first drop, and then there's a larger group of Microsoft employees in general who are real enthusiasts. They take if that one's working well, they take the next. Then there's 2 sets of preview audiences of real customers who are willing to take drops every day, and we put it through those shells. And then once a month, we'll actually send it out to every customer. That gives us enough testing and everything. We're not worried that a new operating system is going to break folks in some horrible way. So that's basically how we do the flighting and restricting the audience. But we had to build those systems. So all these things were necessary to get to the point where we could actually deliver a new OS literally every day to some set of customers. The other big thing that we had to do was align our schedules. So again, it's a large organization, and if we're going to ship all the time, now all those different teams need to be on the same cadence. And some of them they had 2-week sprints. Some of them had 4-week sprints. Some of them had 6-week sprints. It was all over the map. And then, of course, us with Kanban, we didn't worry about it because whatever, we ship all the time. So that made it much easier for us. But these all had to be aligned. So we agreed on a 4-week cadence. We got everyone to shift their schedules accordingly to match up. That was tricky, but eventually people got on board, and then and then we were ready to go. This was particularly difficult because with Xbox One, we're launching a new console. We only do that once every 8 years. It just has to do with how the hardware works and what the upfront costs are and when you start making money on the hardware and stuff like that. Because initially you don't. You make money as the hardware gets cheaper over time and you can mass produce it. So for a brand new product, we spent years and years and years developing the Xbox One before it was launched. So we go from this multi-year launch period to every month, right? That's a huge shift. So, you might think that's ridiculous. How could you possibly do that? Wouldn't you first go to maybe once a year, and then once every 6 months, and then once every 3 months, something like that? No, we went from multiple years. I think it took us like 3 years from the time that a lot of people were working on it, and 2 years before just about everybody was working on it, to every month, the very next month after it was launched. And the way we pulled that off was that we practiced over the summer. So it launched in the fall, of course, in time for the holidays, and we started practicing early the previous summer at going every month. Now, of course, we weren't going to every customer. We were going to various different preview audiences and so on who are trying out the console before it's ready for prime time. But that's when we aligned schedules, was the early part of the summer. We got the ingestion system working, all these different things. We'd been preparing for it, but we really started practicing as it rolled up. And at first, we could only do it once a month, but then we were able to do it once a week, and then we started doing it every day. And we just started shipping every day, sometimes twice a day. It was a little nuts leading up to launch. But by the time we got to launch, the only difference was now we're going to go to all of our customers, not just our preview audiences. And so we were ready to go. But we need to get people in the right mindset. So where we landed with this, and the most interesting piece I wanted to just kind of finish with about this story, where we landed with this was eventually we realized that the only code movement and branching system that would work, once we made all these other changes, was to have a branch for every monthly release and have all the engineers working directly in that branch. No code movement at all. That had a few different, now there's code movement from month to month, of course, because we have a different branch each month. We need to have separate branches each month in case they need any servicing on them. So we're working on the next month, and the previous month there's a problem. We've got to service it, so we need the other branch. But we had people work directly in that release branch. That solved 2 problems for us at once. One, of course, don't have to worry about code movement. The code's already there. But the second one was psychological. And I have to thank my boss for this. He came up with this idea. It's psychological. The engineers, if you're checking into dev branch, whatever, put in code. It's just the dev branch. So what if it doesn't work? If you're checking into June, June 2015, that's going out in June 2015. You have it in your mind. You can't, everything about what you're checking into tells you this code is going to a real customer. this month. In fact, it's going out the next day to a preview audience, but it's going out that month. And that had the right effect. People just naturally think twice before they check into that branch. And since it's the only branch that's open, people have to work that way. That worked out very well for us. So that made a big difference. We still had plenty of productivity. It didn't affect things in that manner, but people were just a lot more careful with their code. And that's worked out wonderfully well for us. We still do have feature branches, but those are rare. Those are like when we change compilers, when we change the number of cores that were assigned to various different processes. That was a major change. That was done in a feature branch. When we changed the graphics subsystem, that was in a feature branch. But those are rare instances. Almost all the work goes on right there in the release branch. So just a little bit about Kanban, and this is what our Kanban board looks like, except cleaned up because it's on a whiteboard and very messy. But how did Kanban make a difference? So my team is, the team that I run now, is one of the most critical in the entire group. We're responsible for everything that's used to build the Xbox. So, as I mentioned earlier, we do the build, but there's a whole bunch of other systems that my team supports and enables for the entire Xbox division. And things are constantly changing in this environment. So we use Kanban. We've been using Kanban now for 4 years. It's phenomenal, and I'm sure you already know that, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here. But it gives us so many advantages in terms of planning. Our customers constantly changing what they need. We're constantly getting feedback through the telemetry, through people write, everything. We need to just turn on a dime. And when we were using Scrum many years back, I used Scrum for like 8 years. It's great. Apps so much more wonderful than I was using in the early days of Office and Windows. But it's no match for Kanban. Scrum, there's a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks can go by before you're changing plans and stuff. With Kanban, we could change on a dime every day. As I mentioned before, with alignment with the rest of the team, no worries, right? We aligned with any team on any cadence that they were on because we shipped every day. So no problem. We executed a lot faster than all the teams that we served. A lot faster. No one was ever waiting on my team, which is phenomenal. And that's because they would decide that they needed something, and at the last minute they would tell us that they needed help from my team. We would do it and finish it before they were ready. And that was just greatly appreciated because, of course, they would need to do work as well, and we worked faster, and we did not work weekends. I can tell you, just about everyone else did, but we just crushed it. It's just so much better. For status, having stuff physically on the board, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but having your status, having your backlog visually on a board was phenomenal for us because our internal customer, our partner teams that are depending on our work, which was pretty much the entire organization, they would want to know where things were. Anytime they wanted to know, either they'd write to us or they'd come by. We could just glance and tell them if we didn't happen to know off the top of our heads. And when they could physically look at the board, they see it moving along. It just inspires confidence. It inspires trust. And when, of course, when their thing was more important and it needed to be moved up, we can say, great, let's take a look at the board. Let's look at the things that are in front of yours. Which one would you want to move? And they look at them like, ooh, that kernel change, okay, that one's more important. All right, okay. Actually, we're good. Right, it's what would happen most of the time. So having it visual, having that status be so transparent to people made a huge difference. And of course, the continuous delivery, always having quality, just put my teams in a position for success. It's stunning, and my boss, of course, loves it. Again, I've been very happy. But also, my partners love it. It's very easy to take care of my team as a manager when all of my customers have such great appreciation for what we do. So it's been a huge advantage for me and my team, and it's spreading. As soon as people start seeing it, there must be, I hazard to guess. It's something on the order of 10 out of the, I don't want to, I'd have to look up on a chart, but when people start using it, they don't stop. And it's been fantastic to see that happening within the organization. So with that, I will open things up for questions. If you want more details about this, by the way, I am so in love with Kanban that I wrote a book about it. Part of the Agile Project Management series. So those of you who know and love Agile Project Management with Scrum, there is now Agile Project Management with Kanban. Different author. But nonetheless, it's wonderful. And then what I did was I had a whole bunch of sections. They've got a little Xbox controller next to them. A whole bunch of little sections all through the book called Inside Xbox. And you can read all about the various different things that we did in using Kanban and also other aspects of what went on. You can learn more about what happened inside Xbox. So, any questions? Yes?
You spoke of your board as though it were physical. Was it in fact physical, or did you use software?
So the question was, did we use a physical board, or did we use more of a digital online board? I am one of those strong believers in physical boards. Boy, are engineers lazy. I've been a development manager, for 15 years, 16 years now. So I manage leads who then manage teams. And if you put any kind of resistance in front of an engineer, they won't do it. Right? They just don't. So you think people use the web. If you have an online board, you just bring up the web page, move around the things. How could it be easier? It could be easier if they walked by it every single day and just wrote on a sticky and moved the sticky. So the physical board makes a huge difference. No one takes shortcuts with it. It's very visual. It also, there's something about taking this, physically moving it. There's something great about that, especially when other people can see. It just has the right kind of thing. Was it a quick follow-up?
Very quick. I just want to know two things then. What do you recommend for people who are globally diverse teams in that situation? Also, on your board physically, how many people have hands on it? 10, 100, how many?
Okay, so there were two questions. One, what do you do for distributed teams? Of course, you're going to need an online board for distributed teams. And then there are a variety of products that do that. And then the other question was how many people play with the stickies? Every team member does. I have a separate board for each of my teams. Each of those teams, they go from 5 to 10 people, depends on the team. And then, of course, every member of that team has their hands on the board. Sure, all the time. Yes, question?
Does this give you a competitive advantage relative to the people you compete with?
So the question was, does the way that we work, the continuous deployment, using Kanban to provide continuous delivery, does it provide an advantage over our competitors, in our case, the primary one being Sony, with the Sony Playstation? I truly believe that it does. Sony got out to a big lead. They did that, not based on the software or hardware, but on some smart business decisions that they made. Basically, they sold their device for $100 less. Turns out, people care about money. Good one to remember. They sold it for $100 less. And they also, we moved to a digital delivery system, which is what everyone uses, streaming, digital media. People love that stuff. We moved on to it. Turns out that there's a lot of people out there who still like the old days of having the physical discs. And Sony spoke to them, and they loved that. So we had to switch to physical discs again as well because we got crushed with that. So they got out to a big lead. We are closing that gap very quickly. And we are delivering features every month that are only enabled by operating system changes. Some of them are just UI changes. Those are easier. But real changes to the device that are just killing them. And I don't know if we'll catch up this year or if it'll take another year or two because they got a nice lead to start. But we are rapidly closing that gap. And that's being written about quite a bit by just industry observers and, of course, by our customers. We've now gotten to be the #1 selling console in the United States. We haven't sold the most units because, again, they got a head start. But we are now outpacing them pretty substantially. So I think it is a big advantage. Yes?
Your comments about the release branch, how it's like working right in the release branch, really interesting. It seems like you're able to do that, though, just because your company is so large and you need lighting for testing. Is that right? Like, what would you recommend for a smaller team to get to the release branch?
So the question is, we have a single release branch. Is that related basically to the fact that we have a very large team, and what would a small team do? Actually, I would say it'd be easier for a small team to work this way than it has been for our large team to work this way in one branch. So I would recommend for a small team. I will never go back. Oh, by the way, all of the UI that you see in the Xbox One, those are all apps. Even the home screen is an app. And those apps, we build in a separate system because they're built on top of an API layer, so we can build them in a separate system. That separate system, people are looking at me like 7 hours, that's a ridiculous build time. Those apps all build in 10 minutes or less. Those are really quick. So that's why they use a separate system, because they can turn a lot faster. So those folks using that faster build system for each of the individual apps, whether it's the party app or the friends app or whatever it might be, they all use exactly the same branching structure. Part of it is to align, but part of it also is that same psychology just works. And those smaller teams, they can easily fit within those branches. Yes?
I'm guessing that part of that process platform relies on other product groups like Azure or something like that. So
Right.
how has your Kanban system impacted them?
So the question is, obviously, we in Xbox, my team particularly, but all the teams in Xbox, we depend on other groups. How does our using Kanban, how has it affected them? So the short answer is not much. People get set in their ways. They just do. A lot of people use whatever system they were originally, like in the first team when they first came out of college, they kind of stick to that, unless their manager beats some other system into them. So we haven't had a lot of influence just from the fact that we're using Kanban. People look at it and say, wow, that's great. I would love to work as fast as that. How do I do that without changing anything about how I work? And so folks, I would say it doesn't change them very much. I know that we've had to make adjustments to Kanban. I'll talk about this briefly. You'll notice here there's this gray track. Oh, it's not showing up as gray on the screen very well. But there's a middle column called track right in the middle of implement. And that's what we do when we hit upon something where we have partners that we depend upon and they're just not ready. They said they'd be ready. We timed it, but turns out the quality's not there, or the features aren't there, whatever it might be. So we track it until it's ready, and then we pop it back out onto the top of the stack when it's ready to go. So we've had to make some adjustments in how we work for working with our partners. Mostly, the rest of the company looks at Xbox and what we've been able to do, even at the operating system level. Everyone always thought, oh, the web people, well, whatever, you know. But when we started doing it for the operating system, you know, folks took notice. So there is a large push in Windows and phone to start shipping all the time. And they are looking at what we're doing, and gradually, you know, slowly but surely, we're giving them piece by piece by piece. We can't give it to them all at once. It's a big organization. It's hard to change. But piece by piece, they're starting to figure this out. Yes?
Do your product managers or marketing people take advantage of your continuous delivery to test features?
So the question was, do our marketing people, our product manager people, do they take advantage of this continuous delivery system to test out ideas and just generally take advantage of how fast we're turning? And the answer is absolutely. They love this. It's funny, you know, my skip-level boss is Phil, who's in charge of Xbox. Phil, what is his last name? Oh, goodness, it's terrible. Mine's escaping me. Anyway, Phil, very famous guy. He's you know, the face of Xbox. He runs the entire organization. And normally it's games. Normally it's Halo, it's Gears of War, it's, you know, whatever it might be. My favorite Portal. You know, those are the things that really sell the device. The way that we ship now has become the #1 thing that he and the marketing people talk about. They adore it. It is such a differentiator. And the reason why is that our customers, they love the games. But the games often ship on multiple different platforms. And the games only come out maybe once a year. You know, each individual game only comes out once a year. With us shipping every month, we're making customers happy every month. We listen to what they want. We give that to them, you know, a month or two later, and depending on how hard it is. And the customers are just delighted. They can't believe it. They are so pleased. So it's become a huge advantage. Yes, in the back?
Can I ask you some more about the branching strategy? It sounds unusual for a Kanban situation. So if you've got a June branch, what do you do with tickets that are on the board that are not finished when you get to the end of June and you want to make release?
So the question was, what do we do if you're working on a June branch and everyone's working on a June branch, but there's code in there that isn't ready? It's not going to be ready till July. Maybe you knew that in advance. Maybe it just, you know, turns out just took longer than you thought. What do? The answer is you put it in the June branch. But we have switches that turn it off so it doesn't appear to the customer. A lot of people were like, oh, create the next branch, please. It's not going to work until then. I'm like, no. You're in the regular branch. You're doing high-quality work. It's going out to customers. It just won't light up until the next month. And that's also what we do if something's just taking too long. People used to freak out. Oh, my God, it's not going to come out, you know, for the holiday. It's never going to come out. Now it's not going to come out this month. It'll just come out next month. No big deal. So we just have them turn it off if there's a problem. Yeah, do you have a follow-up?
Follow-up question is, do you default everything that our code switch is off when it starts? Or do you make a decision later in the month that, oh, gee, that ticket's not going to make it into the done column by the end of the month. We better put some code switch mechanism on that so we can turn it off.
So the question was, okay, so is the default then for all new feature work to turn it off, and then only we turn it on when we know it's ready, basically? Or do we just do that later? And the answer is it's both. There are some features that we know aren't going to be ready on time, and those are switched off from the beginning. There are others where the engineers are more optimistic, and then they realize late that it's not going to make it. Obviously, a lot of the time they are right, and it shows up just fine. But if they get surprised later, then they add the switch later. Yes? We generally, the way that we work it is, of course, we have the previous months, of course. But we have our main branch for what's coming up next. And then only when that branch hits what's called feature complete, meaning everything we were planning on shipping, it's in there. And now it's going to preview audiences. It's just baking for a while before it goes out to everyone. So it's still going out to real customers, but not everybody yet. When that happens, we create the next branch, and everybody moves over. And then we're only doing some fixes that are found by customers that are unusual cases and stuff like that. Yes?
You mentioned that some people are set in their ways sometimes and why some teams maybe haven't switched over, and that sometimes the manager might have to beat it into their head. Have you ever had to beat it into anybody, and if so, do you have any advice for good ways to do so?
So the question was, I talked about how sometimes managers have to beat people into changing. What have I found is an effective hammer for bat or something for doing that? So what I've done, I've done two different techniques. One, my current team I built from scratch. So I hired all the people in. Some of them used Waterfall, some of them used Scrum, some used Scrummerfall, whatever. And I just told them this is how we work. And so that was easy. The previous team, most of them were using Scrum. And there I said, hey, there's this cool thing called Kanban. Want to try it? I gave them a nice presentation about it. And I didn't force them. I just said, hey, you can try it. Why not? And then, of course, some people wanted to please me or were just curious or whatever it was. They gave it a try. They loved it. And then it started spreading. Yes. It is a competitive environment. People do want to do better, and those teams are doing better, so yeah.
So you said you got the build time down about 50%. Can you give any specifics on what you did for that?
So the question was, I said we got our build times down, quite substantially, about 5 hours, 6 hours, down to just 7 hours, just 7 hours. How do we do it? Just basically building less and building more in parallel. There were lots of, we very closely evaluated the dependency graph in the build, noticed areas that could be going in parallel that weren't, and we forced those to parallelize, and noticed whole portions of the branch that just weren't being used, and we cut them out. That sounds, boy, it was that easy to say. That was not easy to do. Windows is enormous. I mean, when you think, it's really big, that's tiny compared to how it really is. It's incredibly large. Yeah.
You had mentioned getting everything across the Xbox teams into a single 4-week cadence. And the coordination in that strikes me as scary. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that and maybe push versus pull sort of interactions between the different teams.
So the question was, and this needs to be the last question, we're out of time. So I had talked about how getting all the teams aligned was tough to do, and how did that work? Was there some push and pull there? Honestly, no. That was dictated from on high. The one thing that we did that I thought was smart was that we gave people plenty of warning. We said, okay, about 6 weeks from now, we're all going to be on the same cadence. Figure out how you want to make that work. Figure out how you're going to time it. We're warning you. We warn you. We're warning you again. Like every week, right? It's coming. Here it is. Okay, here we go. Are you ready to go? Ready to go? Ready to go? Boom. And we dropped it in. So it wasn't overnight, and that was smart. Yeah, we just insisted. And people like getting paid, so it worked out. Thank you all so much.